Hey guys, Nate Willis here, and welcome back to another YouTube video. And yes, I know that I look like I just stepped out of a hurricane. I haven't been awake for that long, so that's pretty much why. Today, though, I'm giving my first impressions on the new Citizen Soldier album, Scarecrow. I listened to this around when it first came out. Some life-related stuff happened in between then and now, so I didn't really get a chance to record this video until now, but I really like this album. I think it is probably my new favorite Citizen Soldier album, and I will actually be doing a proper track-by-track review and sort of analysis of the album as well. In fact, I've already started writing the script for it, so this is just going to be a short, unscripted, off-the-cuff video, just kind of giving my, first impressions, my overall thoughts, and the first thing somebody might notice when they look at, say, the track list of this album, and let me pull up the track listing real quick here, is that this is a pretty lengthy album. It is 18 songs in length. Now, admittedly, it does feel a bit shorter because of the fact that all of the songs are pretty short. There are only 2 songs that go over 4 minutes, and most of the songs are 3 minutes or less. That is one thing that was a little disappointing. I do wish that there were more longer songs in the album, but the songs themselves always manage to utilize the short length as much as possible and really make up for the short length by just, the songs themselves being that good. And I generally would prefer a short and meaningful experience over a long and meaningless one. Side glances at early rock and roll epics from the 60s, where they'd always take a normal length song and then artificially lengthen it by throwing jam sessions in the middle of it. And that's actually a thing with me about really long songs. I don't mind them, but I do like them to be a certain specific way. I don't really like it when they just do a normal length song and artificially lengthen it by throwing jam sessions in. I like it when they do a long epic that has different parts to it, different sections and stuff. Anyways, that is off topic. So I don't want to delve too much into my thoughts on any of the specific tracks, because again, that'll be for the review. But I mean, from the day the first single came out, you could already start telling things were starting to get a little different. They were starting to go in a bit of a different direction. And if you guys remember at the end of my, well, not necessarily at the end of it, but during my review, or first impressions video, I guess, of This Is Your Sign Part 2, the things I said that I wanted to see from the band in the future was that I wanted to see them experiment more with, song structures. I wanted to see them bring back a lot of the, really solid guitar work that their earlier albums had. Because in This Is Your Sign Parts 1 and 2, the guitar really took a backseat, except for the riffs and stuff. The focus was definitely the vocals and lyrics, which obviously isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I wanted to see them, keep the really solid vocals and lyrics and melodies and all of that were in This Is Your Sign Part 2 and Part 1, but also... What in the world? Okay, my cats are... I don't know what was going on. Keep the really solid vocal melodies and lyrics and all that stuff, but bring back a lot of the really solid guitar work along with it, so you have the best of both worlds. And I wanted to see them bring back the guitar solos, because both parts of This Is Your Sign did not have any solos in them. And I can safely say they pretty much did all those things. They did start experimenting more with song structures. They brought back a lot of the really solid guitar work, while keeping the vocals at the forefront at the same time. And they brought back the guitar solos. Now, admittedly, there's only 4, I want to say, of them in a, lengthy 18-track album. I do wish there were some more of them. But the songs that don't have solos, I don't think they really need them, because they make up for the lack of a solo with interesting bridges and all that kind of stuff. And that's actually an interesting thing about a lot of the bridges in this album. The bridges from their, from like This Is Your Sign parts 1 and 2 were often just basically meant to be like another verse, essentially. But in this album, while some of them are like that, a lot of them are more of these interesting musical ideas more than like really fleshed out verses. And I could start kind of listing off examples here when I look at the track listing. For example, Fever has the whole screaming section, which is just basically the same lyric repeated over and over again, but it works really well. And, right before that is the, like, spoken section, saying the same words, and then it goes into screaming. And then you have Anyone But Me, where they repeat some of the lyrics from the earlier part of the song, but with a different backing track, and then go into that little short instrumental section. Runaway From Myself kind of does that a bit, where they repeat a spoken part from earlier in the song. It's more like rapping, but you know what I mean. And then throw a breakdown right after it. Still Frame is an interesting one because that bridge is very short and it's just a repetition of the same lyric from earlier in the song, just changed up slightly. I'll admit I don't like that bridge that much just because I wish they did more with it. Maybe throw in like a short little instrumental after it, but I do like some of the interesting effects that they put in there. Like there's some reverse sound effects they throw in there, which I think is really neat. Suicide Note has the breakdown followed by the like spoken part leading into a scream, and then Madhouse has the rehab, recover, relapse, repeat part that leads into screaming followed by the like heavy. It's not really a breakdown, but it's more like a riff down, I guess you could call it, followed by the creepy spoken child voice part that I still don't know which band member did that. Save Your Story also has the breakdown section, which doesn't lead back into another chorus or anything. And then Scarecrow does actually have another, bridge, kind of like the ones they did in the previous album, followed by the solo. And while all of the bridges in these songs are very simple and they're more like musical ideas than a typical type of bridge, they work really well. There's just something about them that works so well. And the songs that do have more traditionally styled bridges, like the ones in, This Is Your Sign parts 1 and 2, are very well written. You have, for example, Tattoos, for example. That is probably one of the most well-written bridges in the whole album, in my opinion. Another thing I noticed, though, is that if I go ahead and quickly pull up the track listing again here, a lot of the songs, they really started doing more with their their vocal melodies. There's a lot more in the way of like minor pentatonic-y or like blues scale type melodies, which I really appreciate. All of the melodies in this album are just so catchy and so good, I will admit, though, there isn't much in the way of riffs. I'm going through here. Fever has a riff. Anyone But Me sort of has a riff. I mean, you could technically call it a riff. Trying to see the other ones that have riffs here. Let Me Let Go sort of has a riff, I suppose. Trying to see what else here. Suicide Note has a riff. Save Your Story has a riff. So yeah, not much in the way of like riffs here, other than like verse riffs and all that kind of stuff. And I suppose I do wish there were more riffs, but like, I don't know, man. Like I said earlier, the parts that are there really make up for that. As for things like guitar solos, I will admit that there's not you're not going to find any shredding or anything like this in this album when it comes to the guitar solos. The best guitar solo is probably the one from Easy's Never Been This Hard, or at least that's my favorite solo. The other ones that have solos, if I go through here and actually look through here. So Easy's Never Been This Hard has a solo. I Hate Myself has a solo. Limit has a solo, and Scarecrow has a solo. So, although to be fair, the solo from Limit is more like a repeated melody, but there are enough changes to it that I would still call it a solo. And I mean, yeah, that's only 4 solos out of the 18 tracks, which like I said, I do wish there were more of them, but they're still solos. They did bring back the solos, and I appreciate that. Another small complaint I have about the album is the guitar tone for the rhythm parts. It's not bad, but I feel like it doesn't really have enough bass to it, and I don't know if there is bass in this album. Like, I assume there is, because I know they have a bassist, or at least I think they have a bassist. So if there is bass in this album, it's not very high in the mix. And I do wish that either the bass was higher in the mix, or that the guitar tone had a bit more bass to it. The only other real complaint I can think of, and all these complaints are honestly just nitpicking, they're not really actual issues with the album, but I would maybe change up the track listing a bit. To be honest though, like, you can listen to the album with the track listing it already has, because it works just fine, but I probably would have changed it up a little bit, and I might even, for when I listen to the album, I might make my own track listing for that. But if I'm being honest with you, I really feel like this album, while you can listen to it all the way through, you should, at least the first time you listen to it, you should listen to it all the way through in album order. But you can also just listen to the songs on their own, because that's essentially what this album is. It's a collection of singles. They can all pretty much stand on their own. And that is another thing I would like to see them do in the future, is really go more into the whole album format, try to make an album that is really meant to be listened to all the way through. Maybe even a full-blown concept album with like an actual story. And I know they have already done concept albums. This Is Your Sign, parts 1 and 2 are technically concept albums. But I'd love to see them do a full-blown concept album with an actual story, that they could probably relate into mental illness in some way. Maybe it could be about a story of someone dealing with mental illness. I don't know. But all in all, very much impressed by this album. I think it's probably my new favorite Citizen Soldier album. And I'm not exactly sure if they're going to be able to top this, because, that's how good it is. But we'll see. The previews that they've released for the next album have already looked very interesting. So we'll see. I will get more in depth in my actual review of the album, but for the time being, that's going to be it for this video. So yeah, peace out, and don't be afraid to show who you are.